Should start recording now. There we go. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Lena Ross, co-founder of the Agile Change Leadership Institute, and welcome to our podcast, Conversations of Agile Change. Joining me today as our guest is Kylie Browne, who is a Director of Organisational Change for a major government agency here in Australia, where we are podcasting from. Kylie is passionate about delivering digital products and the ones that allow people to work smarter, improve service delivery, and ultimately transform staff and client experiences. With a background in change management and digital communications and strong technical knowledge of UX design and agile product development, she leads with empathy, curiosity, and a commitment to building team culture that enables cross-functional teams to thrive and succeed. Kylie, a big welcome to our podcast. Hello.
Hi, Lena. Thanks for having me.
That's our pleasure. We've certainly seen examples of your passion in your roles. So we're really excited that we're going to be able to chat with you today to find out more so our listeners can learn from your experience. So Kylie, we usually kick off asking, how did the universe conspire to get you in your current role and do this amazing work that we love hearing about?
It's been a long and windy road, Lena, probably like a lot of change managers who've been around for a while. I actually started in strategic communications, so that is my background. And at some point I ended up on a relocation project. So it was bringing 3 offices into one in the Melbourne CBD. And at that stage, the organisation that I was working for didn't really have a good understanding of what change management is. So I was called a communications and stakeholder engagement advisor. Yeah. But as we later learnt, that is essentially what change management is. So that's how I started. And then from that, they saw the value in that. We set up an organisational change management function in the organisation. And then kind of transferred from there into digital transformation. So the last 2 major projects that I've been working on have related to digital transformation.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how role titles have evolved, like you said, over time. Yes. To finally land where it is what we do. And through those evolutions in your roles, you've probably seen more and more agility creep in as well into day-to-day and how we deliver change and plan change. Do you want to talk us through a little bit how that agility has come into your life and how it plays out in your workplace or past workplaces?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it definitely has evolved over time, particularly I think at much faster pace since COVID. So we needed to do things more quickly. And the turnaround timeframes were crunched. And since then, they haven't seemed to go back, to be honest. No. So there's not that long runway that there used to be to plan change projects, that maybe existed 5-10 years ago. So the way that we've seen it is probably threefold. We've seen it through agile projects run in agile, like using Scrum. So that means that we have to fit to the cadence of how those projects are run, whether that is monthly releases or quarterly releases, but it has changed the way that change management and how we deliver change management runs. And I think then the other way is that we have started to adopt some of those agile practices in the way that we work. And a lot of that is because of that pace. So long gone are the lengthy documents that you spend, a month preparing at the beginning of any change initiative. We need to get all that information more quickly. What we have actually started to do is kind of do that in stages and present that just in time as we're discovering that. So, starting with stakeholder analysis and then moving into change impacts, etc. All the bits along the way, we share that with our governance groups as we're doing it, rather than one big document at the end. And then I think the third thing, which is more aspirational, is agile organizations. So, agile organizations that are nimble, they evaluate and under constant improvement cycles where change is normalized and routine. It's kind of embedded in the DNA of an organizational culture. That's kind of the gold standard. That's where we'd love to be. And I think that will again see probably another evolution of change management practice as well.
Yeah, that's true. So you've hit on a couple of things there, like the change management practice and then at organizational level. With the change management practice and your team, how do you find, like, what's the best approach you've taken, or what works really well, do you think, to increase or build their change capability with agility?
So the team itself, we started with when I started with my current team, the focus was really on communications and training. They had a strong desire to be doing more than that. So that was the first thing. Like, how do we take us from where we are now and into probably that more agile mindset and proving and showing value throughout the organisation through the work we do, but also through those governance structures as well. So bringing the people focused or people lens to all of the conversations rather than just the project lens. So that was one of the first things that we did. I think then making sure that anything that we produce, the artifacts have purpose. So making sure that they are relevant to the audiences. And that's where I'm a massive fan of visual communication.
Yes.
And I know that you guys preach about it. I think it's fantastic. And it also allows us to be agile, because we're not having to write, long documents or anything like that. So we introduced that as kind of like a template, but it's really adaptable and flexible, because it has to be meeting the needs of whoever you're communicating with, whether that is your project sponsors, project boards, all the way through, down to you working with line managers, etc. So we reuse those a lot, makes it quick and easy. But also the benefit, I think, of using visual communication is it allows people to absorb information quickly. And then the value of it is you're having the right conversations. You're not having the conversations about how, it's worded in a sentence or a paragraph. You're actually having those meaningful conversations about, well, what does this mean for our people? What are the impacts going to be? Where are the change risks, etc. So that's the big shift, I think, that we've seen probably in the last 12 months. That, in addition, more collaboration. So engagement, absolutely critical. And so that's us getting out and speaking to people and not being project led, making sure that we have those contacts with our SMEs and the business areas, running our own, business rep groups. And I think that's been really, really helpful too. I think that's probably something that we all know, engagement always trumps everything. So, yep. And I think I mentioned it in relation to communication, but also the approach, always being adaptive and responsive. So it's that testing and evaluating in small bite-sized chunks. Is this working? If not, how do we pivot? So I think those things are probably at the core of it all.
Yeah, they sound like really good operating principles too, don't they? And that real shift, it sounds like, Kylie, from an artifact for the sake of the artifact, but really it's to springboard those conversations and co-creation and the engagement, like you said. What sort of feedback are you getting from the people at the receiving end of this?
I would say there's been some really positive feedback.
Yeah.
But I think more than what's more valuable than that is actually seeing how it's been adopted. So as I said, the really great conversations, but also it's enabled the change leadership to kind of step up a notch as well. So they've wanted to become or be change leaders, but we're now giving them the information and the tools that they need to be able to do that and lead the change effectively. I'm not saying we've got it perfect. We've still got a way to go, because we're on a journey. This is a continuum. But yeah, no, it's really made a big difference to the work that we're doing.
That's great. So you mentioned visual comms. Are there other favourite agile, if we call them agile change practices or principles, that really resonate with you or some of your team members?
I think visual comms, absolutely, because that actually has enabled us to, as I said, also look at capability uplift as well, both for the team but also for the organisation. I think the other thing that I'm seeing emerging a lot more is the need for the change manager to be a facilitator. I mean, all the work that we do, actually in the last 5 years, so in the variety of organisations that I've worked with, we've had to move to remote. During COVID, but now we're staying at hybrid. So we have had to learn how to facilitate a lot of those workshops and conversations remotely. And I think that that's a slightly different facilitation technique than you might if you were face to face and post-its, and I do miss those days. But there is great benefit because in doing it using whiteboard or whatever, if you're fortunate enough to have access to a mural, which I would love, but we don't. So I think those things mean that actually we can do things more quickly. You don't have to scribe, you don't have to take it all down. It's people are doing all the typing for you. It's quick and it's easy, and it actually makes the analysis at the end of that probably a lot quicker as well, I think. So we're using that and as a practice and a technique a lot more as part of our engagement, and it's been really effective.
That's great. It's great that it has, people have really lifted their game, haven't they, with that? And the flip side to that, which I find really interesting, is how people have adapted it so so quickly. Like, we talk about adoption and people sometimes not liking change, but this imposed change that COVID gifted us with remote working and getting better at delivering things virtually doesn't seem to have been a difficult one to adopt. It seems a lot of people have just taken to it.
I think they have, but I think the flip side to that is that the change saturation and fatigue now is or has been for a few years, is setting in. So that is something that we're really cognizant of any time we're introducing a new change. And I think that's consistent across the board, particularly for organisations who've gone through digital transformation at the same time as having to deal with COVID. There was a lot to absorb. We know we can do it. We know that it wasn't always done well, and there's great lessons to be learned from all of that. But I think that if we keep at that frantic pace, I think it's going to be, we're going to see the health and well-being of our people affected. And now that brings us to that next level, which is, we need to be managing that pipeline of work more effectively, be really mindful of health and well-being of our people, and how all of those change impacts, consolidated view of those change impacts, so that we understand how that's working and affecting teams and people.
Yes, and that's a good point. I think a lot of change teams and change practices are now really going to that view to see what the collective looks like. And that starts to lead our conversation to looking at change and agility through a more organisational lens or a more portfolio lens. So, Kylie, we know that you are in the process of building an impressive and strong community of practice where you are at the moment. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you pulled it together and things that might have got in the way or getting in your way?
First of all, I have to say it's very young.
That's okay. It's got to start somewhere. But
It does. But it's been pleasantly surprising how many people are interested in learning more about change management. There are people who are doing it just because they are interested. There are change advocates who put up their hand in their teams to say, yep, I want to contribute to this. Usually the innovators. We have some people who it's just landed on their plate because somebody needs to pick up that work in their team. We have change leaders who are interested, so usually at the line management or who are managing people who are going through those changes. And so it's quite broad. We haven't kept it just to a change management professional practice.
Yes.
We want to make sure that the capability across the organisation is increased at multiple levels. So the way that we plan to approach that is as we run our workshops with them, they will have different focuses. Some of them will be really, really practical. Some of them will be inviting guest speakers in. And thank you to you and Dr. Jen Fram, who've actually done one for us. And I think that giving that variety actually kind of helps people be engaged. So when they're really practical, we'll see probably less people attend, and when they're broader, we have seen quite a few people attend from the organisation.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And has anything surprised you so far in the way, like in your early build? You said you're in the early phases. Is anything surprising you?
Well, I can't take credit for this. The team did a fantastic job at setting the groundwork. So, we took the change management approach to setting it up. We made sure that we, engaged with people early so that we had allies in helping us to set that up, making sure that we had the right focus. And then, of course, once we've got those people who have put up their hand and said we want to be involved, we've asked them what they want. Why have you joined this? What do you expect? So that we know that they're really hard to keep the momentum going for communities of practice, and they can die off fairly easily. So we want to make sure that we're always delivering something of value. So that means constant engagement with them, asking them what they want, and getting feedback from them. So we try to make those sessions engaging as well.
And from what we saw, there was a lot of senior executive involvement in that and attendance, which was that's contributed to the impressive nature, I think, of the community you're building, and also how the word's going to spread. Because if the important people are there, a lot of other people want to be there and be seen.
You're absolutely right, and I'm really grateful that there is really strong leadership around the importance of change management at an executive level. So I think that has been a real key to not just the success of the COP, but also for the work that we have been doing, in the last few years, and allowing us to kind of transform alongside the organisation, our change management capability.
Yeah.
No,
it's been very impressive. And another thing that we know about you that's also impressive is you're a lifelong learner, and you are so curious and not frightened to experiment. So we love the courage that you show. What are some of the things that you've learnt that have stood out for you that you've been excited to go and apply straight away?
I think probably when in my previous role, I was very fortunate to work alongside some fantastic service designers, which got me really interested in human-centered design and could really see the parallels with the work that we do. The artifacts, or what we produce out of it, might be different, but the conversations often are the same. And so I think that's probably one thing that I've taken absorbed a lot of that into my practice. And in fact, when I'm facilitating a workshop or designing a new workshop, I will usually look to human-centered design, my human-centered design toolkits, or to get inspired as to how we can do this really well. So I think learning from other disciplines.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually why change management has, is adapting and evolving, because and I feel like we're doing that at a faster pace than, say, for example, project management, which has been fairly structured and consistent for a long period of time now.
Yeah.
But I think that the challenge, which I think from what I can see, a lot of change managers are really kind of stepping up to, is as capability increases in an organization, you need to then take that next step to be meeting people where they're at, which means that we constantly have to evolve alongside the capability of the organization. Expectations increase, and also it gives us an opportunity. I mean, the way that mainly we do this is through experimentation.
Yeah.
So anytime we do something for the first time, there is always a debrief. Did this work? How can we do it better?
Lovely.
And so we just evolve. And I think the other thing is it needs to be fit for purpose. So I don't think I've ever run workshops the same way. They always will depend on who the audience is and how big or small, what we're trying to get out of it, but also what is their, if it's a team, what's their team culture like, etc. So we design usually with them before we actually run those workshops.
Yeah, that's really nice. And you said something there that reminded me, when you experiment and then you go back and do like a mini retrospective or reflect on it, it keeps the environment really safe, because you're experimenting and then you're talking about what didn't go well in a safe forum. So it really builds that safety around trying something new again, rather than it being, punitive or scary. So it's really nice to hear that, because that just continues, that just builds more and more momentum for more experimentation, which I know you've never been frightened of. So
no, never. But it's really important to do that, because a lot of the team, my team that I'm working with, they're new to some of these facilitation methods.
Yes.
So there is an element of coaching around that, but also the opportunity for them to reflect is really key.
Yes. Yeah. They self-coach in a way, don't they? Because they reflect themselves and then they do the thinking, and we just facilitate it, which is nice.
Yeah.
Well, if you had a magic wand, Kylie, what might you wish for? Maybe in this role, or maybe career-wise in general, to make your path easier?
I love data. So I think my wish is to have better access to data for data-informed decision making. So and it's a little bit of a struggle at the moment. We don't have some of the systems in place that other organizations have. And so we're having to do that a lot in the traditional methods, surveys and asking people, and so there's an element of quantitative and qualitative around that. But I think being able to use that data to then tell the picture of where is the organisation at, better manage change saturation, and work towards an organisation being change fit. They're kind of that's what I'm thinking about at the moment. How can we take those steps to get us to a place where ultimately, because we're hearing a lot about change fatigue, how can we do that better?
Yes.
So they're probably, if I had a magic wand, that would probably be it. And really good access to being able, and also the tools. We can do those things manually in PowerPoint presentations and things like that. The tools generally at this stage are for really big organizations and are expensive. My magic wand, if I had a magic wand, it would be finding something, a product or that is available for us to do that at mid-sized organizations in an affordable way.
Yeah, you're right. And look, I've heard that pain point expressed before, and it's the cost, and it's also the complexity of if there's a tool there, and they can be sometimes barriers to wanting to do something better as well. So it's that fine balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
And no, that's a really good point. To wrap up, Kylie, what can you share? If you had to share a couple of tips for other change practitioners or change practice leaders or directors of change wanting to bring a little more agility into their change practice, what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, don't be afraid to experiment. I think that when we have explained it to groups that we're working with, that this is the first time we've done this, where we invite your feedback at the end, they are also more gentle with us, so that's actually good.
Yeah.
And it allows us to continue to adapt. So I think that's probably one thing. I think then that leads to this being committed to continuous improvement. So always reviewing. We've just introduced a framework and principles. They're where we're at now, but we need to review those and make sure that they're going to they have currency in the future. So I think it's that that evaluation and not being afraid to experiment.
Yeah, great wisdom and great parting words from you, Kylie, who I know is very brave and courageous in all those things you like to do.
I'm not sure about brave and courageous, but definitely curious. I'll own that one.
Well, with curiosity comes some bravery and courage too. I know that because I've seen you in action. So it's fantastic. It's fantastic to have you with us. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wished I did? If there's anything else you want to get into the conversation?
I don't think. I think we've covered it all, Lena. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, it has been a great conversation, and you've shared some great tips and insights into your approach, and shared your wisdom with some people who I know listening would find it really, really valuable to take and apply as well. So on behalf of Conversations of Agile Change and Dr. Jen Frum and myself, we'd like to thank you so much for being our podcast host today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.